And
Dude,
then
we're here.
Thomas,
Okay,
who's
we
the
have-
big cheese for Dallas. Okay.
And we're just
then
waiting for
Linda,
the change.
Deanna, Angie, Thomas, no, Paul. Our friend Sharon Melby, who I don't think has been to any events.
Yes, she has. She's been to Mooney.
She's been, okay, and I'm so embarrassed. Tell me your name again.
Lisa.
And Lisa. Lisa, where'd you come from? How'd you get here?
Not on a list, no.
Say it again. The list.
The Calligraphy Guild list.
Okay.
I can never pronounce it.
Calligrapher.
All right, so this is
Thank God somebody.
this is the some of the Dallas Fort Worth calligraphers and the Kaligrafos calligraphers. So I'm just in Dallas, and I'm going to hand the phone to Angie. So she's just, you can sit and just sort of.
Hi everyone, say hi.
All right. So thank you very much for coming, Marcy. Thank you very much for opening your home, Marcy and Jim. I hasten to add, because I'm sure usually it's always Marcy hearing Marcy and Jim not hearing Jim. Jim hearing Marcy. Right. So you see how it looks up there, so you don't have to sit. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. Like that?
And so just see how is it big enough from up there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Right. So, this is here for a reason. Maybe this best is. This is here for a reason, because these people are the reason I'm here. So, Speedball has wonderfully agreed to publish my manual on Copperplate Script.
Congratulations.
Which is a big thing, because they've never really published a manual for anybody else. So as you know, they normally publish the Speedball textbook, which Angie and Randy worked on, and managed the publication and all of that madness. So they've never really published something for somebody else. And I'm so touched and grateful that they've gotten in touch with me about this. So I've come up with this thing, this fourfold symmetry, as I call it, on how Copperplate Script works. And I thought it would be nice to sort of run through this with you guys, because it makes seeing the structure of the script a lot easier, and consequently writing the script a lot easier. The reason why I'm doing a Facebook Live, because it'll just get out to people and they'll get to see what this explanation is. And as Angie is here in Dallas, I thought it would be great that you guys get to see it first. Because of course I go to Toronto in a few weeks and I give them a lecture on the manual as well. So, right. So the name of the manual is called Copperplate Script, a Yin and Yang approach. And there is a very specific reason for that. So I trained as a Reiki master, and I practice Reiki. And the Reiki has really helped me to overcome, well, not really to overcome, but to grapple and cope with the repetitive strain that I've done to my thumb because of calligraphy. And that repetitive strain is in part, in a great part, due to writing badly. So one of the things I've been working on is a series of new holds on how to hold a tool that negates this damage that happens to your hands. Now, I'm going to start off with a brush. So I'm using one of these, so this is a new brush released by Kurotaki at the beginning of the year. This is their Zig Art and Graphic Twin brush. So this is the, so there are two of these. One has a spongy tip, and this is the new one, and it has a brush tip. The reason why I've called this manual a Yin and Yang approach is because there's a lot of metaphysics embedded in the manual. The manual is structured around geometry, mathematics, and physics. Yes, there's lettering as well. But when you see how it works, it will really change the way you perceive the script. But as well as physics, there's also metaphysics. And that is because the manual is also about helping you to understand how to tackle the lettering properly, which means how do you sit. And your posture is critical. So you need to sit upright, feet flat on the floor, because if your back's straight, you're not crumpling your lungs, so you can actually breathe. How many times you're writing in your head, and then you get there, and then you look at the work and you're like, well, why is the work looking like that? Well, because you were looking like that. So, but also when you're not sitting upright, your arm cannot move. Beautiful curves cannot be formed by the fingers because they are busy. They are holding the tool. So if you give them something else to do, either one or both of those things will fail.
Okay.
So by using the fingers to hold the tool and allowing the arm to produce the curves, you end up with a different muscle group for a different exercise. So all of this, I have these 3 videos on Facebook, on YouTube, where I talk about posture and position and placement, and they're great videos, and they will change the way you work, and they will also change the way you work, not just with Copperplate Script, but with any script. And they also make sure that you stop suffering. You do calligraphy and you get up, you're like, oh, my shoulder, oh, my back, and it's because you're slouching, you're not sitting correctly, the chair's not at the right height. And if the chair's, look, I've put 2 pillows under here so that I'm actually at the right height for this table. So knowing what the right height is for you is really important. So getting back to the manual. So the reason why I called it a yin and yang approach is because the line of universal beauty, which incidentally is not a compound curve, because a compound curve in physics is this, and the line of universal beauty is this. The line of universal beauty, when dropped into one facet of the fourfold symmetry that I've come up with, which is something I call elliptical confinement, will give us an elliptical yin and yang symbol. And that's why I call the manual a yin and yang approach, because it's a unified, holistic approach. It encompasses not just the lettering because of the lettering, but lettering does something different to us. It touches us in a very different way. We connect to our calligraphy through our heart. How many times when you're writing, you feel, not necessarily like you're going to cry, but you feel overwhelmed with emotion? And that's because the lettering, when done at the right speed, because each script has a specific speed at which it can be written at. When you find the right pace of the script, the right rhythmic structure of the script, it resonates with you, and it opens your creativity, it opens your energy centers, and it starts to break down walls that you've built. And so it helps you to recognize this, and sometimes it makes you a little bit emotional, and that's why we connect with calligraphy so easily. So this yin and yang approach I've come up with this thing called the fourfold symmetry. And the fourfold symmetry is based on the letters fitting into different things. So the first facet of the fourfold symmetry I call angular confinement. Now, when you went to school and they said to you, draw an apple, as a young child, you can't just draw an apple. So the first thing they tell you is never try to draw a circle. Draw a square first, and fit the circle into the square. So if you have a square, and you're trying to fit the circle into the square, you are going to touch the center of these lines at something called a tangent. So tangent is where 2 lines just touch each other. So we're going touch, and touch, and touch, and touch, and touch. Yeah? So these are called tangential touchings. So the angular confinement takes the line of universal beauty and breaks it down into its true form, which is actually 3 straight lines. Most people think the line of universal beauty is this, but that's wrong. The line of universal beauty is actually that, and that, and that. It's 3 straight lines. There is a little turn, and a little turn, and we get that. The little turn is only a 1/6. And the bottom turn is a 1/6, which gives us a 1/3. And the middle bit is a straight line. And that middle bit is 2/3 long. So the whole length of the line is 3/3, but broken up into these little thirds. This is a really important facet of the script, because one of the biggest problems with this script is this shape. When you do your letter M, does it look like the letter is going to fall over? And it looks like it's going to fall over because this axial line, it's there, it's 55 degrees. But it has an apparent visual distortion because the tops and the bottoms have gone beyond the 1/6. So it looks like halfway between the 55 and that line. In order to get it right, if you make it a 1/6, little down, little and down. Compare this distance to that, and immediately the letter looks a little bit more upright. The 1/6 is really important, and I'll go over that in a second, and I'll show you why it's important. But knowing that the line of universal beauty is actually 3 straight lines helps you to sort of come to terms with the fact that you're not doing this. So the angular confinement shows us that straight line, straight down, across, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the letter B. Because we are going to do a 6th and hit and a 6th and tangent, 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 and tangent. So all of the letters fit into their shapes. I've been able to work out. So one of the reasons the manual came about is because of hundreds of thousands, bless you, hundreds of thousands of emails over the last 10 years. How does this work? How does that work? Why is this way? Why is that way? I can't do this. I can't do that. How come you can do it? And so I started to collate these questions. One of the biggest questions, one of the most frequently asked questions was, how wide are the letters? Well, how wide are the letters? So if you don't know how wide the letters are, how are you expecting to write the script and get it to work? So this system that I've come up with, I've been able to calculate the width of every letter, both in the uppercase, the majuscules, and in the minuscules, and the distance of the ligatures between the letter.
Are you using so a lot of times we practice on a grid?
So I've made up a new grid system for this.
Okay.
And it's based on a series of 6ths, because we have a 6th at the top, a 6th at the bottom, and 2/3 in the middle. but the way in which the sixths and the thirds and the halves work depends on the way in which a specific form of an ellipse is formed. So I will look at that after I sort of finish all of this. So that's the angular confinement.
So the width of the letter comparable to the Roman widths?
No, it's a completely different thing.
Okay.
So this is the angular confinement. Now, the angular confinement also looks at, I'll use this one. The angular confinement, the next in the fourfold symmetry is something called elliptical confinement. And the elliptical confinement follows basically like an angular confinement, follows on the fact that the letter is based around a series of ellipses. Now people tell you Copperplate script is based on an oval. When you think of an oval, what do you think of?
An egg.
An egg. Well, if you are making an egg, you are not making Copperplate script. So an oval is not a correct assumption for the shape of the letters, but an ellipse is. Now an ellipse is a more regular type of oval. So with an oval, you think the top is narrower than the bottom. That's not what you want for this script. You want a shape where the tops and the bottoms are the same width, and the sides are the same width. And that kind of regularity comes into the structure of the script. So we have oval 1, we have oval 2 because of the line of universal beauty. We have oval 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8. And we have one other oval that we always miss. Now, energetically, we all need personal space. The letters also need personal space. They have an overriding space, an overriding ellipse that confines them. And that is that. Now if we take this B and we stop here, the ellipse would be there, and the line of universal beauty would bisect the ellipse into two even halves. So already there are two things to help you structure the letter. There's angular confinement and then there's elliptical confinement. Now, some people have said to me, well, if you do this, what is all this space here for? What about this space under here? What about the space here? Well, that space has to be balanced. It has to be there because you have weight here, you have weight there, you have weight here, and you have weight here. And so all of those little spaces are counterbalances for the shape that is within that oval, that is confined within that oval. The next thing we have is something that's a little bit trickier to show. So I call this continuous movement. Now, this is where the metaphysics really starts to come in. There are always three parts. And invariably, two of the three parts you don't see. So, if you're Christian, you would think there's the mind, the spirit, and the body. Well, there's actually the spirit, the mind, and the body. Because the spirit is there, the mind is here, and the body is the physical construct. In Buddhism, there is something called the resolving third. And in the resolving third is about light and shade. But it's also about something that appears between the light and shade. And so you have light and dark, and you have the separating line. Again, three. Now, when we inhale, you don't see the inhalation. People always talk about the exhalation because, you know, the exhalation is the talking. Because if you're talking and you're inhaling, you're like... So there is this thing that we don't see because we know it's there, but it's just not part of the perception. When we inhale, the body pushes out against itself. So it's quite a long movement. It takes time to inhale. When we exhale, the body collapses in on itself. So it moves in a downward fashion quicker. That tells us that a diagonal stroke is longer. So let's just do this way. That a diagonal stroke, I'll do that again, is longer than its vertical counterpart. And we know that. We can see that. We're not blind. But there's a third movement in there that we're not taking into consideration. And that is, whenever you change direction, you don't change direction while you're moving. You stop to accommodate the change of direction. Yes? The body does the same thing. When you inhale, you don't inhale and exhale. Inhale, and then the body has to change over to exhale. When you are writing rhythmically, and of course you can't really be rushing this because the script has to work, the lines have to spread, the ink has to get to the paper. So already the way in which the script is written is a little bit slower. And by using your breath to produce you slow down, and the script has time to form. But by writing slower, you also start to generate a meditative field around you. How does that translate into Copperplate script? Well, in order to produce an exhalation, you have to inhale. You can't exhale and then exhale. You will collapse. So how does that work? Well, the line of universal beauty is always taught as a separate line. But it does not happen on its own. In order to get to the top of the line of universal beauty, you have to get to the top. And that is another stroke that we very rarely see. Now we see it in the M and the N, and the A and the V and the W. But not where we need to see it. So this first stroke is called a connective stroke. So of course this is the same kind of concept that you have in Spencerian script. This connective stroke you don't see. So the line of universal beauty is here. So the connective stroke goes at 65 degrees. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and stop. And line of universal beauty, and up and around and down and stop, and up and back and up and up and stop and down and over and up and pressure and out and out and out and out and back up and over and A and up and down and down and out. All those little dotted lines are happening, but you don't see them because they're not inked in. So what you see, this is what I do, and look at what you see and what I do. Now when done rhythmically, that produces something that everybody asks me, oh, how did you do that? I'm going to show you. there is no way I could reach back to that starting point if there wasn't rhythm engendered in the script. And so you know this phrase, you hit the ground running? Well, if you hit the ground running, the letter is engendered with motion. If you are starting from a stationary point, you are starting. You have to do the work. You have to get the tool moving. You have to find the rhythm to engender into that shape. But if there is an inhalation and an upward movement, you are already traveling. And so there is motion already embedded in the script structure. How many times people say, oh, Copperplate is really wooden. Well, yes, it is really wooden. If you're starting from a stationary point, it's going to look wooden. So by adding motion to the script, it has a vitality of its own. It really comes alive. So that's the continuous movement. And the fourth part of the fourfold symmetry is something I call variable velocity. How many of you drive? My God. This state is huge. Everything is far away. The motorways are enormous. You can't walk anywhere.
No.
Even the streets are large.
We don't walk.
And that's really interesting because, you know, Copperplate script is like driving a car. When you see a corner in the road, what do you do?
Well, you stop first.
Well,
Slow down.
hopefully you slow down and not speed up. So you see a corner and you slow down. The tighter the turn, the more you slow down. The tighter the turn, the slower you take the turn as well, apart from which you don't really know what's coming around the corner. So when you think of that in a car, why do you do the opposite on a page? Because when you have a corner, you want to do this. Woo! Yeah! The corner! Well, you have no control over what's happening here. If you did that in a car, you would end up off the road. So let's compare a nib to a car. Now, a car is this big, and the road's that big, and you are this big. The nib is this big. The paper is that big. The two front wheels of the car equate to the 2 tines of the nib. The amount of ink in the nib will equate to oil because you have friction and lubrication between the tires. And the number of people and the height of the car affect the weight of the car and the center of gravity. So if you're in a tall car and you are taking a corner, you better take it carefully, otherwise the car will tip over. So this is called centripetal force. When you're using centripetal force, when you're turning that corner, you get to the apex of the turn, and you don't speed up at the apex, because it's just after the apex of the turn that you go. That is the zone of acceleration. All of this is physics. And it's in that zone of acceleration that you can speed up. So the fourth part of the fourfold symmetry is something called variable velocity. And what that basically means is different parts of the letter are done at different speeds. So we have a tight turn, which is slower, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 12 and 13 and 1, 2, 7, 8. Did you see that? So different parts of the letter, we have different speeds. Now the different speeds also do something else that I can't really account for, and this is amazing. So we have this and this is where the speed slows down to take that turn. Those 2 points exist already because of the velocity, right? And this, and that, and that, and that happen. So the 2 points at where the velocity changes exist. And how this happens, I have yet to work out. But the next line you produce intersects the previous line at those 2 points. So there is a natural rhythm embedded in the writing of the script. Because that would not happen by chance. I have done this enough times to try to make it not work. And it always crosses just where the speed changes. So that's the last part of the fourfold symmetry. Now, the thing about this fourfold symmetry is the manual, you can use this manual in any way. I have 2 ways that you can use the manual. The first way is you can either start with the minuscules, because if you prefer the minuscules over the majuscules, start with the minuscules. If you prefer the majuscules over the minuscules, start with the majuscules, because you know what? If you are learning a script from a part of the script that you don't like, you are not going to invest any energy in it. And once you get that part of the script working, you will fall in love with the other part, because it's all about knowledge. One of the biggest problems calligraphers have is ignorance. Oh, I don't like this script. Okay, why don't you like the script? I don't like how it looks. Have you tried writing it? No, I just don't like how it looks. Okay. Try writing it. Give it a chance. And as soon as you start learning about the complexity of the script, you might not love it, but you'll have respect for it. And you will learn to like it out of the knowledge you gain. So, if there's a part of the script that you really enjoy working with, that's the part to work with, because it will help you to move to the next part of the script. Now, so this fourfold symmetry works in a number of different ways. You can either go through step by step, by step by step, or you can decide to do the two parts of the symmetry together. You can do angular confinement and elliptical confinement together, so they work, so they work in tandem with each other. There's lots of ways to do this, and I've sort of tried to find a way to make the manual really accessible for people. You either do it slowly and you take your time with it, or you work with it in parts. And this then led me to some really interesting discoveries. So, the line of universal beauty needs its connective stroke. And 1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just doing this really quickly to just sort of get a sense of what's going on with the script structure. Right. Now, this thing that I've come up with is my own idea. It's come out of writing papers on Copperplate, studying lots of writing master copybooks. This is a different way to do Copperplate script. A very, very different way. It also makes the script a little bit narrower. It is a framework. Once you have this framework and you understand why it works the way it works, you can apply any of the English roundhand scripts from the beginning of the 16th century all the way up to the present day on this framework. You might need to expand it a little bit because this structure is a narrow structure, and it's narrow because it formalizes the script using geometry. Engraver script is a different thing. Engrossing script in itself, that too is slightly different. So this is a structural integrity facet for you to then understand how the script works. Now, I've just done this because this will give us something on me. When I discovered this, I was just like, this can't be for real. So this line of universal beauty, connective stroke line of universal beauty, will show you how wide the capitals are. Oh yeah, you like that. Now, based on the geometry, this does not touch the top of that line. Do you agree? Because the top of that connection between the connective stroke and the line of universal beauty is a sixth over there. So this and that meet there. So they meet 2/3 above the cap height and below the baseline. We do Copperplate Script because we like to play with flourishes. How do you know where to contain a flourish? Oh, you just let it go. You're like, oh yeah, just well, there is a zone of flourishing that I've been able to work out based on the height of the letter. And that zone of flourishing is 2/3 the height, the straight bit, because of how these cross each other at the top. I mean, the manual will go through it in more detail. And that will allow us to do this. And that zone of flourishing will help to keep the letter within a balanced area. If you go outside of that zone, then you have to construct, so I'm using a Fibonacci sequence here. You have to construct a series of concentric zones. You need to stay within the zones. That's how the flourishing is balanced within the letter form. It's not magic. I know a lot of people think it's magic. And when it doesn't work, they think the magic is not there. The magic is the human side of this. I've created a very strong mathematical and geometric construct for you to work within. It is a framework. And my mother always used to say to us, if you're upset, go and cry. Make yourself cry as hard as you can cry, and it will wipe away the cloud of emotion so that you will see what you're doing without the emotion. You have perfect clarity in those 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, the emotions will start to creep back in. And so this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give you a technical construct upon which you can apply the human structure, which gives it its subtleties. But if you don't have a technical construct to put the human structure on, it will always collapse. So, you know, I look at this zone of flourishing, but I want to talk to you about some other movements. So there is this shape. So I'm using whole arm movement here. I'm rolling on the muscle. Right, that's an ellipse. So the ellipse has a major axis. Yes, do we know how an ellipse is formed? So an ellipse, the parts of the ellipse, we have a major axis, which is the full length of the ellipse. We have a minor axis, two semi-minor axes, yes? And an ellipse is made up of two circles, two large circles, and two small circles. Yeah? Are we following? The center point of this little circle is called a focal point, or focus. Yeah? Now watch this. This is how long?
1/6 and 2/3.
Brilliant. You know this exercise? Are you ready? Are you ready? Watch this. This is the same height as that, and by going through the turn and up and over and down and out, just going to make a little bit more of a flourish here. This ellipse at 55 degrees, when you make the turn from the horizontal to the 55, crosses the major axis at the focal point, which is a 16. The mathematics and the geometry are there to support the letter. Now, when you make this letter with a tool, you're not going to hit that sixth every time, but you will be close enough because you will know that by where the sixth is, the turn needs to happen somewhere around there. The geometry is there to help you, it is not there to hinder you. I didn't say geometry and physics to scare you. I said it to give you a little bit of support, because the problem with our letter forms is we think they form naturally. And they do form naturally, but they need a little bit of support, and by knowing that this support is there, it will help you to tackle the letter a little bit better, with a little bit more confidence. You are not guessing. You are not just making a guess. You have an intelligent purpose behind that, so you could make a better estimate of what to do. Now let's have some fun. Because this is, I mean, it's quite serious work. So the geometry is really important. How many of you like flourishing? You'd put your feet up as well as your hands if you could have. You'd be like, woo! Right, how does a flourish work?
Don't know.
Haven't figured it out. Except they're, well, I thought they were ovals, but I guess now they're ellipses.
The flourishes are dead easy, as long as you can see the geometry underneath them. So, basic flourish. What is the most basic flourish? The most basic flourish is this. Right. If you make a straight line, and you make a curvilinear line, or an S-curve, as the people in the 18th century called it, that straight line is invariably how much longer? A third longer than the curved line. How is a curved line formed? So a curved line has a convex part and a concave part. Where the angles are neither concave or nor convex, we have something called the inflection point. And on a straight line, along a straight line, that's where the curve intersects the straight line. This is your basic curve. And this basic curve, and let's flip this around, will give us the line of universal beauty. Why is this so important? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We're following? Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We all do this? Yes? And 1 and a 2 and 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes or no? Why is the flourish not working? It's not working because you don't understand the geometry that bounds the flourish. You don't understand the supporting structure of the flourish. But also probably because you're trying to do the flourish too quickly. Take your time and the flourish will happen. Also, if you take your time, then they will actually get a chance to do the work. Because sometimes you make a flourish and the ink drops out. If the ink drops out, chances are it's because it's not actually getting the time to get to the paper. So you might actually know how to make a flourish, you're just not doing it because it's too fast. So some other basic flourishes. I always turn my page for this. So if I do a fractal letter, I turn the page so that we have weight and spiral and weight and spiral and weight and spiral and spiral. Do you see this? What is that? What is this?
It's the oval.
So we have an ellipse, and we have another ellipse, and they start at the same point. They share a part of of one of the minor axes, and so that helps us to gauge where the zone of flourishing is for this. But it tells us that this space needs to be consistent. It's the same amount of space. Now this is quite easy to form because we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And so in physics we have something called the axis of rotation. So you could take a shape and rotate it through different axes, and by rotating it through the axes you get the exact placement of a balanced shape. Now every time I sort of talk to people about the manual, more comes to my mind that I haven't written down as yet. So I'm now wondering, well, how much is this? It looks to me like this is a 5 to 7 degree opening, which is great because there is something called the variance of tolerance, which I figured out, and it is 5 to 7 degrees, and it exists in how the page is held. I'm not going to go into it because it's quite sort of, it's quite technical, and it can be quite sort of scary. As if all of this isn't scary. So that's sort of the structure. That's the structure of the manual. Now I'm going to use our Hunt 22B, and I will unashamedly talk about Speedball because they have done something nobody else has done. They are publishing my manual, so I'm happy. Thank you very much. So I hope that sort of, and this is about a third of the information that's in the manual. So it's quite a lot of work that, you know, Angie and I are sort of putting together, and you know, Angie's been really great in helping me sort of see the manual in a different way. Because one of the problems I've had with this manual is, this is my information. It's here. I can see it. But when I explain it to people who have not been living with it for however long I've been living with it, it's very difficult to explain as a concept. I mean, I'm trying to break the concepts down into very simple parts. And like last night, one of the things, you know, we've been up until 3 o'clock in the morning talking about stuff that we've been working on. And one of the things we looked at was how to make it more accessible to somebody other than me. And so we've worked out systems to help people. One of the things that we talked quite extensively about was making videos to help people sort of work their way through different aspects of it. Because I don't know, you've probably noticed, when I write, I don't hold the pen down here. So that's about 30 degrees. I hold the pen here. So I am about 5 to 7 degrees off the perpendicular. And I am not down here. I am up here. Because by holding the tool slightly higher up, and this is for you, Marcy, by holding the tool slightly higher up, a correspondingly smaller movement up here makes for a bigger movement down here, which means you can address more envelopes faster. Because you are not, and this, and you know, in the manual, I sort of highlight letters. So there's a capital word for you, meaning you. Because you have to do all the work. When you are down here, you have to make that tool travel the whole distance of the letter. Well, if you are up here, you are using physics to make that shape, because you're making a little movement up here and it's making a larger movement down there. So you are not making the whole movement. You are doing something. You are actually being human. What does that mean? You are using tools and you are letting the tools help you. Now, I have a little technique which for a very long time I did not share with anyone. And I showed it to Angie last night and she freaked out. So what I'm doing is I'm just giving the page a little bit of lift. So this is a very, very difficult technique. You shouldn't try to use this technique for a while. You need to know the letters really well in order to use this technique. So by giving the page a little bit of lift, so some of you put couching paper, a pad underneath, yeah? Because why do you have the pad underneath? Because the teacher made this. Marcy, go into the kitchen and come back with your brain, please. So this is what I meant about using your brain. So Marcy and I were talking about this, and one of the problems I have with calligraphers is they don't like to think, because they're too busy writing. Oh, I want to write. Yes, I understand you want to write. But have you thought about the nib? Have you thought about how the ink and the nib are going to interact with that paper? Or are you only going to think about it after you've set up and you start writing and it starts to bleed? 80% thinking, 20% writing. If you figure out the 80%, you actually have 20% enjoying the writing, instead of 80% bitching about the writing. So, the lift is really important, because you are now using the tools to help you. So I know that by holding the tool slightly higher up, so that's still not enough lift. Do you see this? Do you see that movement?
Mm-hmm.
So that's about 1.5 millimeters movement. I always hold down here. How many of you hold here? And flatten the page. I always hold down here. And by holding down here, there's a little bit of give up here. Now, right, I'm going to press down on the page so that you can see this. Starting from a stationary point. Okay, nice letter, it's okay. Starting from a moving point with a little bit of give. I don't know how we're going to show this. Look at the hairlines on the first R and look at the hairlines on the second R. And now look at the flourishes. The hairlines from the lighter, from this bit, are half the thickness of these hairlines. Because when you put the nib on the page, you are doing the work. When you allow the paper to interact with the nib, they work together. And the nib can glide, can skate on the surface of the page. Now, I filmed this from the side using a telescopic lens, just to see what was happening. And my nib doesn't actually touch the page. What you see is the ink leaving the nib. That's how lightly I write. Now, this takes time. It takes a lot of time to be able to compensate for this movement. It's not such a large movement. It's sometimes only really 0.5 millimeter of movement. But when the nib goes down for the downstroke of pressure, you have to be able to accommodate the movement so that the letters don't look like they're dancing around. My Copperplate script is quite exact. You know, there is not a top line here, which I always use. One of my pet peeves is when you look online, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Tumblr, you see people writing. So they're writing a script, right? They have a baseline and an X height. Are they using the X height? Oh no, I'm good enough to be able to make every letter the same height. Use the X height. It's there for a reason. It's there to help you with the consistency of the shape. And so by aiming for the X height and keeping it within the line, or you know what? If you like to hit the outside and the outside of the line, that's great. But don't try and hit somewhere inside of the line and somewhere inside of the line and hope for it to work. It's not going to work. So it's all about consistency. It's all about knowing, being aware of what you are doing, being conscious of that thing. It's like a mindfulness practice. And so that's an amazing tip that I've never really shared online. And I've never really shared with a large group of people because it's something that I've been trying to figure out how this works. And people always say, how do you write so lightly? And I thought, well, I write lightly because I'm using my brain. I'm letting the tools work together. You know, we don't work with our tools. We make them work. And what we don't realize is they then make us work. If we let the tools work together, we end up with this interaction. It's really quite beautiful. Now, some of the times when you're writing, you sort of get stuck in a flourish, and the flourish evaporates. What do you do?
Sometimes I throw the
Great! But that's because the flourish is terrible. What do you do? Just wait. All you have to do is wait. Leave the nib where it is and take a breath. And as you exhale, the exhalation will drive the movement of the tape. And the flourish will reform itself. But that requires you to be aware of what is happening. Are you holding your breath? Because you know what? If you're holding your breath, you will suffocate. If you are not breathing, you are dead. If you are not breathing, your body will want oxygen. And that's why breathing rhythmically is so important. How do you think how do you think my letters are spaced so evenly? Because I inhale and exhale all the time, and I let the breathing space the letters. I don't have to space the letters, because I know I am breathing. Well, I know I am not breathing. I know my autonomic system is taking care of that. Because if I had to breathe as well as write, one of them would fail. Or both. And so by allowing your body to help you, the letters really come. They're there. I had this, I was asked to think about how I think about writing. I think about writing in a very sort of odd way. And I firmly believe that everything that you have to write is on that page in front of you. It's already there. So if you look at quantum mechanics, right? This quantum mechanics theory tells you that everything exists already, at every level. And the only way for you to actually access what is on that page is to be calm and open to it. And the calmer you are, and the more at peace you are with your tools, and your materials, and your surroundings, and yourself, the deeper you can go through the quantum levels. And of course, the deeper you go, the more beautiful the letters are. But it's all about breathing and taking your time. Sometimes your nib has ink on it and you are ready to write. But are you really ready to write? Well, I have a nib, it has ink, I'm writing. You have to be ready to write. And it's only when you are ready to write that you should be writing. And then the writing happens. When you force the writing to happen, you are wasting paper. And more importantly, you are stressing yourself out because you get frustrated because you know the letter is not going to work. But still you're trying to make it where you are forcing the letter to work. It will work. You just have to be calm enough to make it work. That does not take into consideration brides who are demanding that they want their envelopes now. Or fashion houses saying, oh, we're sending the job. We thought the courier left 3 hours ago. Oh, but we need it back this afternoon. It's already this afternoon. So, you know, when you're in a situation like that, then the way around it is once the writing starts, you use the writing to help calm you down. You use the writing to engender peace. Now, I explained some of this theory to some people, and one person said to me, well, you know, I'm Catholic. I don't believe in this, you know, these Eastern practices. And I said, okay, that's great, but do you pray the rosary? Of course. I said, okay, and you don't think that praying the rosary is a meditation? I never thought about it like that. one other person said to me, yeah, but I don't believe in God. I said, are you atheist? He said, yes. I said, go and read a book on quantum mechanics. This rhythmic structure that exists in all faiths and in none of the faiths. It is there, it is a part of us. That rhythm is there. You cannot disprove it. Everything you do will only prove it. And it's all about being at peace with yourself. Right. Now, questions. Who has problem with, yes?
Left-hander.
Lefties. Oh, I love lefties. I love lefties. Right. Lefties.
Flourishing lefties are hard.
Do you hold your pen like a mirror right-handed? Or do you have a hook?
No hook.
So you have a mirror.
Yeah, here.
That's great. You know why? Because you are at the axis of the script.
Right.
Look. Look. Is that not the axis of the script there? So I'm going to hold the tool a little bit higher. I'm not as good with this as with Copperplate Script as I am with italic on the left hand. Come on. Well, so the problem with left-handers is the grip. If you're squeezing the tool, that death grip will stop you from moving smoothly. So the first thing you have to Gaynor, do you know who Gaynor is? Gaynor Goff taught me for 2 years. She is amazing, and she is a left-handed calligrapher. And so I looked at her over 2 years. I looked at her writing. I looked at how she wrote, how she tackled the script, and that handhold, she can do some amazing work. And that, that made me very aware of other left-handers. And so whenever I teach, I'm always really keen to get left-handers in the class. But she also taught me a really interesting trick, and I don't think I have a pencil. I'll just use my. No, I'll use this. So if you think of this as a normal pencil with an eraser on the back, if you squeeze the pen too tightly, the tool will not help you because it's suffocating. If you take a pencil with an eraser on the back side and you place it over where you are writing or next to, because you want the lift, it will transfer the death grip on the pen to the pencil. And slowly over time, that will turn into a lighter touch. Now, if the first time you do this, you break the pencil, go and see a psychiatrist. I've seen people break pencils in class, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Go for a walk. Go for a walk. Then the next thing to learn is whole arm movement. Now, I've also been looking at this whole arm movement issue. Whole arm movement is a problem. You know why? So I've looked at lots and lots and lots of writing master copybooks in German, in English, in French, in American traditions. Now the American tradition says that the pen has to be held like this, right? So I started to look at this, I'm very good at what I do. But I could not do this. And so I was in Asia and I thought, let me just try something. So I tried to get people in Hong Kong and Manila and Singapore and Tokyo to try and hold a pen like this. And nobody could make the pen look like the pen hold in the Spencerian copybooks. Then I came to the States last year and I taught 6 workshops. And I couldn't get any of the women to do it either. But a few of the men could do it. But only men who were Caucasian. So I started to think, I wonder if the shape, your genetic disposition, can affect the way in which your muscles are structured. Obviously they do. So maybe the way in which the tool is held historically is difficult for us to do now, because our hand positions have changed in the last 100 years or so, because we've had hand holds and we've had movement into computers and into typing. But this inability to hold the tool in that fashion I found really fascinating. And the reason why I thought that there is a genetic disposition to this particular handhold is because I've also noticed that there is a genetic disposition to lettering. People who are of German extraction will fall in love with Fraktur if they had never seen it. And instinctively they dislike rotunda. And it's the opposite for Italians. People of Italian extraction will see rotunda and go, oh, I love that. They've never seen it before, but it resonates with them because it is in their subconscious psyche, in their genetic memory. But they will see Fraktur and think, oh, I don't like that. It's too tight and angular. So there's some research to be done there. So it's quite interesting how the handhold changes. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is this. I know how to use muscular movement. But when you're using muscular movement and you put your whole hand on the page, the nib is never going to face the direction you want it to face. But there is a half muscular movement. So the arm here is flat, right? See how flat it is? You know that exercise where they tell you to bounce on the arm? But you can't write with the arm flat, because if the arm is flat, the pen's over here. But by rotating the arm just a little bit, if you rotate it so that the forearm is perpendicular to the table, you're on the bone. There's no muscle to roll on. There's only your elbow you're going to hurt. But if you roll back to half, so you're halfway on the muscle, the bone's here. Look, my forearm is here, so the bone's here. I'm going to, do you see the muscle there? So I'm only halfway on that muscle. That's still a muscle to roll on. And so by understanding how the body works, it will help you to find where that muscle is and how much of it you can work on. Some people cannot work on all of the muscles. Now, there is a fourth video that I have to make, because I told you about the other three, and I'll tell you why this video is so important. So the first video talks about posture, and the second video talks about placement, which is where you're sitting in relation to the table. The third video talks about position, which is where the page is in relation to the table. The fourth video is quite interesting because I told Alice, who worked with me for 3 years and trained with me for 3 years, that I want to make this video, and she said, I don't think you should make this video. It's a little too personal.
A little too what?
Personal. So I start off this conversation in a class by talking to the class. Because once you get this out of the way, you could start working. You will all identify with this. So ladies, you have breasts. When you look down, if you do not see the top curve of the breast, you are not sitting up properly. Because if you can't see this bit of your breast when you look down, your shoulders are probably like this. So you have a great system of sense checking. Unfortunately, most men don't have breasts. So if you're sitting next to a man, you have to do what you normally do, and you have to nag them to sit up.
I just focus on my six pack.
Now, this is quite an interesting sort of, it's a very specific thing that I've come across that I find very upsetting. We are all of different shapes and sizes, and consequently, they don't make tables of different shapes and sizes for you when you go into the classroom. So you have to know how to work. And lots of teachers are afraid to talk to you about things because they don't want to touch you. So if you're tall, the table is a problem because the chair might be too high and your shoulder will hurt. Or the chair might be too low and your shoulder will still hurt. So you have to know where the right height is. So the optimum height is where you're sitting and the base of your elbow just about kisses the table. You know, if you're a big person, you can't get close to the table. So what do? Well, instead of trying to get to the table and stressing yourself out, sit to the side. Get to the end of the table. Because at the end of the table, you don't have all the table to deal with. And you can get a little bit closer to the table. If you're a skinny person, you really have to find this muscle because most of your arm is just bone. So where is the muscle to roll on? The muscle is there, but you have to find it. We will all have difficulties with the way that we are shaped, but we have to find a way to move around that. Because if we don't work around it and find a comfortable place to work in, you are not going to enjoy doing the calligraphy. And if you're not enjoying it, give it up. Because if it's frustrating you, it's a problem. So other ways to work around it. You might want to work with a board that is at a slight angle. Now, Copperplate Script and Spencerian Script, generally done flat. You can do them on an angle board, but the board can be no more than 7 degrees. But that 7-degree tilt will really help you. So there are always issues because of our different bodies. You have to find a way or find a teacher who's willing to help you work around how your body is shaped. Don't let your body frustrate you. I had a woman in a class once. She had these massive breasts. And I said to her, get close to the table. And she said, can't. And I said, why can't you get? She said, because I'm short and my breasts are right on the edge and it hurts. I said, all right, your breasts are huge. I said, so this is what you're going to do. Pick the breasts up and put them on the table. And so she said, what? I said, hurry up, I have other people to teach. I mean, I was serious. So she picks her breast. I said, don't drop them because they're really heavy on other people around you. She rests them on the table. I said, good, slide the chair underneath. She slides the chair underneath. And I said, good, how is that? And she looks up at me with tears in her eyes. I said, go to the bathroom. She goes to the bathroom. So I wait for her, I wait outside the bathroom. So she comes outside. I said, are you all right? And she starts crying. She said, for 5 years I've struggled with calligraphy. And I've struggled and I've struggled and I've struggled. And nobody has told me that you can do that. I said, you struggle with calligraphy. I said, you must really love calligraphy. But it's little things like that that you have to be aware of. You have to be aware of you, of your body, of how your body interacts with you when you're trying to write. You know, slouching is really bad for you. You get up from doing calligraphy and your back's hurting, your shoulder's hurting. It's not really worth it. And all you have to do is adjust something ever so slightly. So I'm going to talk to you about one other thing and then I will shut up. Because you know, I need to give this talking stick to somebody.
50% battery.
I have a question if you can.
Yeah?
I notice you use a straight pen holder rather than the oblique.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Copperplate Script was not written with an oblique holder historically.
That is true.
Thank you very much.
That is
Copperplate Script written in the 17th century was written with a straight nib in a straight holder.
Thank you.
Okay, so that I'm going to have to show you something else, so I will have to hold on to that talking stick. Why? this line you'll probably also notice that I do something called tangential touching. Most people will tell you, oh, don't lift your nib off the page, blah, 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 blah. That is absolute nonsense. How can you write a word without lifting your nib off the page? Which idiot said that? And lots of people say, oh, but Copperplate Script, you're not supposed to lift your nib off the page. You have to dip for ink. So how did you come up with that? Well, so I've come up with this because I know how wide every letter is, because of the system that I work with. I also know that when you make an O, you start down here. Because you go travel and touch and up and over and down and up and down and out. The ligature has to be at the same axis of the script. If you make an O and you do this, oh, well, where is this going? Because it's not at the same axis of the script. If you make an N, the ligature has to leave at the same axis of the script. If you do this, well, that's not Copperplate Script. Okay? So knowing what you're writing is really important. Copperplate Script is, I've broken the script up into a few parts. So in 1604, Lucas Matereau and Louis Barbedor, two French calligraphers, writing masters in France in the 17th century, came up with this system of writing. They worked within this system of French script called the Ronde and the Financieri and the Quilly. They were influenced by the Cancelleresca Corsiva hand, which came from Italy. And they sort of made a mistake with it. Instead of making a ball serif and filling it, they left this loop without filling the loop. And so that, coupled with a couple of things that were going on at the time, by the time that ended up in England, it sort of turned into Copperplate Script. Well, it actually turned into something called, which I call Proto-English Roundhand. Because if you look at Bickham, you cannot produce the lettering in Bickham effectively with a pointed flexible nib, because the script was not written with a pointed flexible nib, it was written with a small left oblique cut quill. So if you try to produce the shapes that you see in Bickham with a pointed nib, you will fail. They will not be exact. The essence of the shape might be there, but the exact structure of the shape will never be possible with a pointed flexible nib, because it was not executed with one. So that starts off this argument as to why you should use a straight holder. Now there's another reason why I use a straight holder for Copperplate and an oblique holder for Spencerian. I do both scripts. When you do both Copperplate and Spencerian, they are close enough to be problematic if they're done with the same tool. So I know in my brain when I pick up a straight holder, I will be writing Copperplate Script. I also know that if I pick up an oblique holder, the Spencerian file will download. That's how I sort of see it in my head. The thing about Copperplate Script and Spencerian Script is, so I'm going to use a slot 03 for this. There is a tendency when you're using an oblique holder for, I can get my lines to line up with 55 degrees very easily. But whenever I use an oblique holder, I have to try to get it to line up a little bit better, because the holder is off at an angle. So already that can add a few angles, usually between 5 and 7 degrees, to the script, but leaning towards the line, towards the baseline. The next thing that happens is Spencerian script has a natural tendency to a little tip here. When I do Spencerian script, I go up, across, pressure, down and out. And that naturally squares off my letters. So I don't have to go back, and you see people going back and they sort of doing this and fiddling around with the script. Oh gosh, what a waste of time. But equally, writing is writing. You have to write. Write from right to left. If you go back and fiddle around with bits of the script, you're not writing. You are not producing something in real time. You are going back and you are changing things. And that affects the value of energy embedded in each letter. So Hassan Nasrudi wrote a really great treatise on writing. And he said every word has a specific quanta of energy. Hence the reason you have to breathe rhythmically. If you then have to take that rhythm and break it by going back to fix things, the subconscious mind will sense that there isn't a consistent movement across the page. And as beautiful as the writing might be, something feels wrong. So, little tip, I'll do it again. Up, across, press, down and out. Cross out. So, there is a tendency, obviously in Spencerian script, the weights are the top 2/3 or the bottom 2/3 of the letter, not in the middle. And the sense that the weight is there. So to get it to do that, now notice, it's not here. It's still lower. It's still here to here instead of being there to there. So there is a natural tendency for an oblique holder to produce a slightly different line. Obviously, it's a different shape, it's an oblique holder, than a straight holder. Also, because the nib is held flatter, because it's really meant for Spencerian script, the flatter the nib, the easier the time spread. And the easier it is to get that shape. Well, that's not what you want in Copperplate script. You want something that is that shape. And so by adding a tool that has an angle to it and is flatter and will spread more readily, which means it's harder to control the widths. Remember in Copperplate script, every downstroke has pressure. So you have to get the same amount of pressure on a curve as opposed to a straight line. Well, by using a tool that is more difficult to control because it's flatter and it spreads more easily, that's you. You have to do that work. Not the tool, that's you having to do that work. Now, you have to sort of alter the way you think a little bit here as well, because one of the things I look at in the manual is this issue with the history of the Copperplate script. English roundhand, Proto-English roundhand, Copperplate. So it's Cancellaresca, Proto-English roundhand, English roundhand, movement to pointed nib, come across to the States, deal with the Americans not wanting to call it English roundhand because they've just had independence from the English. So they decide to call it something different, and they start thinking, well, what do we call it? Well, engravers cut it, so we'll call it engraver script. Oh, but we can call it engrossing script. Now, engrossing script is different from engraver script. And there is a Zinerian Copperplate, which is yet again different from other scripts. Of course, back in the United Kingdom, Edward Johnston starts to work with foundational, which is also called roundhand. But the English calligraphers don't like it being called English roundhand because there's Johnstonian roundhand, and they don't like Copperplate script because the people on the docks use Copperplate to write all the bills, and they don't really want to be associated with that because they like the arts and crafts movement. So they want to go back to italic. So italic and Copperplate script, and they start calling it Copperplate because they believe that it came out of the engraver's burin, which comes from America. So the script is called Copperplate so that there is little confusion with the with round hand, which is actually foundational hand, which is Johnston. So it would be good that once the manual is out, that we start looking at this and we actually give the script its real name. My script, I've decided to call it Copperplate because it's a narrower construct, and this is not an historical script that I'm working on. I am giving you a framework on which you can build your historical scripts. So, question, Tom.
It wasn't really a question so much as I like that little history you just gave with going back and forth and this and that. That would be awesome to read in the book.
Now, that Don Marsh is working on a book, and Don's stuff, Don's history of what's going on is fantastic. So I am going to show you something.
I just like to hear you say that, like, you know, half a dozen more times. It was really cool.
No, I would faint. So this is an app that I use called Noteshelf, and Noteshelf allows us to. What size is it for? Maybe 5. So maybe the red, maybe the dark red. I like this app because I use it for notice I'm holding the tool quite steeply. So one of the reasons I love using this app is because, and what I've done is I've gotten a, so this is an iPad Pro, and I've gotten a screen protector, a matte screen protector, which retards the movement of the Apple Pencil across the surface. Otherwise it just slips all over the place. So I use this to write, to take my notes and to do some sketches and drawings and that kind of thing. There isn't a pointed flexible nib in it, not yet, but hopefully. And you can change color, you can change size, you could even play with some texturalis if you wanted to.
And it's called Noteshelf?
Note, N-O-T-E-S-H-E-L-F. But when you're working with software, you know what? Just give me a quill any day. Give me a quill over working on this, and I'll be happy. But sometimes, like I write some of my letters to clients on this. I will write them a letter and send it to them, rather than typing it, because you can write it and scan it and clean it up and send it, which is a waste of time. Or you can write it on here and just send it as a letter. So you derive the pleasure of writing without having to deal with the hassle of the scanning and all of that. Because really, you're not going to write a letter for a client and scan it and send it, because if you're going to do that, you might as well post it. So this app, Note Shelf, is what I tend to use for it's my sort of go-to app for my notes. And it's great on a train because you don't have to take ink with you. And some idiot will knock the ink over. Maybe you. Onto somebody else. Any other questions?
Going back to the Spencerian versus Copperplate and oblique versus straight nib holder, a lot of times they say left-handers should not even try and use an oblique
Right.
nib holder. So you should use straight all the time.
Okay.
But then now I think my brain will be confused.
There is a little bit of an issue with this with left-handers. Spencerian script is not ornamental penmanship. There is a difference. Spencerian script is a pared down version. Well, no. Spencerian script is the original version, and ornamental penmanship is the thing that comes after. It has tons of flourishes on it. Spencerian script doesn't really have flourishes on it. The letters are simple and clean and beautiful. It's not ornamented. So the first thing I want you to consider is, what are you talking about?
Spencerian.
Are you talking about Spencerian or ornamental penmanship?
No, Spencerian.
Right. So if you are talking about Spencerian script was initially done with a straight holder. So it can be written with a straight holder. Now, this is something that I've been sort of grappling with. Brian Walker, who is an absolutely brilliant penman. I studied with Brian. I studied Spencerian with Brian. And he gave me a real sense of how the script works as a script, Spencerian script, and his ornamental penmanship. He doesn't really like ornamental penmanship because he doesn't like the flourishes. He loves this really simple, pared down version of the script, which is so beautiful and elegant. And Brian always said to me that when you sit to write, the script should issue from your chest. The axis of the script should issue from the sternum at a perpendicular angle. And essentially, you are writing uphill. Yes?
Right.
Okay. Now, that works for a lot of people. It's a nightmare to get it to work though, because it's an angle that a lot of people are not accustomed to, but it works brilliantly. So for years I thought that this was the be-all and end-all of the structure of the axis of the page, position of the page. With the research that I've been doing for the manual and the teaching that I've been doing, I've come to realize that as wonderful as that is, and it works in 50% of the cases, and I always thought that it was the principal rule. There are two things that are super important, and that is, one, the nib must face the axis of the script. Because if the nib is not facing the axis of the script, the tines cannot spread. Now, with this thing that I found called the variance of tolerance, you could get away with a 5 to 7 variance. So the nib could be, the nib doesn't have to be there. It could be there, or it could be there. But it can't be more than 5 to 7 degrees, because if it's more than 5 to 7 degrees, the tines will not accommodate the spread. That's the variance of tolerance. 5 to 7 degrees. Now, the nib must face the axis of the script. And you know what? It doesn't matter where the page is being held. So if, and I was teaching this in, where was I teaching? Can't remember. teaching somewhere. I can't remember what I was teaching. And I was teaching somebody in the studio, a left-hander. And she couldn't do this. So she did this. And I said, okay, well, if the nib is pointing towards you, she said, well, I can't do anything else. I said, well, turn the page. So she held the pen like this. I said, you can write upside down, you know. And if you're writing upside down, you're not smudging. And she said, really? How do you write upside down? I said, well, the first thing you have to do is try. Oh, but it would be too difficult. I said, you know, if you would actually try, if you would just shut up and try to write, we can then have a conversation. And she complained it was too difficult. And I said, I've just walked around the room and you still haven't tried it, you're just complaining. So that made me realize that when things change more than you think they are possible, you have to battle with the student to get them to accept that it can be done. And as soon as she tried to write upside down, it took her 2 or 3 letters, she was into it. So I then realized that the most important thing is not the axis, not the position of the page in relation to you. Well, yes, that is important, but the principal thing is the nib must face the direction of the script. So if you have to work this way as a left-hander, you have to find that place. And left-handers, there are lots of variation, there are lots of ways that left-handers hold tools. But more than that, there are more ways that left-handers are uncomfortable with tools than they are comfortable. So it's always quite a specific thing to work with left-handers, because you have to help them find that way. But you have to try, if you're not working with somebody who's comfortable teaching left-handers, you have to try as much as possible. But send me an email.
Okay.
But I'm back in May, so you know I can sort of work with you more intensely. Any other questions? Good. I'm hungry. Thank you very much. Thank you all for staying so very long and listening to me waffle on. All right, so good luck, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.